The cold storage door slammed shut with a metallic finality that echoed through Lena's bones. Darkness swallowed her whole as Daniel's footsteps faded into the howling storm outside. She screamed until her throat burned, pounded against the steel until her fists went numb, but the mountain held no mercy for the betrayed. He had taken everything, her savings, her future, her trust, and now he was taking her life. As frost began creeping across the concrete floor toward her trembling body, Lena understood with terrible clarity. She had been left here to freeze to death, and no one knew where she was. If you're gripped by this story of betrayal and survival, stay until the end to see how Lena's darkest moment becomes her greatest turning point. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city, so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The morning had started with such promise. Lena Valenti stood at the bathroom mirror of the mountain chalet, smoothing down her dark hair and studying her reflection with cautious optimism. 26 years old, a history teacher from a small town near Turin, she had never considered herself particularly lucky in love. But Daniel had changed that. Daniel Russo, with his easy smile and confident charm, had swept into her quiet life 8 months ago and made her believe in fairy tales again. "Almost ready, amore?" His voice drifted through the door, warm and familiar. "5 minutes," she called back, applying a touch of lipstick. The color made her look healthier than she felt. The altitude was affecting her more than she'd expected, leaving her slightly breathless and dizzy. She studied the diamond ring on her left hand, turning it so the stone caught the light. It wasn't large. Daniel had apologized for that, explaining that he'd invested most of his liquid assets into the business opportunity. But Lena didn't care about the size. She cared about what it represented. Stability, partnership, a future built together, the business opportunity. That's what had brought them to this isolated chalet in the first place. 3 weeks ago, Daniel had come home to their small apartment with an excitement she'd never seen in him before. He'd been meeting with investors, he explained, about a revolutionary hospitality venture in the Alps. Luxury chalets that could be rented to wealthy tourists managed through a cutting-edge app platform. The returns would be extraordinary, but the window to invest was closing rapidly. "I'm putting in everything I have," he'd told her, taking both her hands in his. "But Lena, this is our chance to build something real, to have the wedding you deserve, the home, the life. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't absolutely certain." She'd hesitated. 15,000 euros was everything she'd saved over 5 years of teaching, every euro scraped together from modest paychecks, every sacrifice, every dream of security. But Daniel had been so convincing. He'd shown her projections, photographs of properties, testimonials from other investors. And more than that, he'd shown her a vision of their future together. A future where money wasn't a constant worry, where they could travel, start a family, live without the grinding anxiety that had defined Lena's childhood. "We're partners," he'd whispered, kissing her forehead. "What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. We do this together." So she'd transferred the money, all of it. And now, supposedly, they were here to see the properties firsthand, to meet with the development team, to celebrate their investment and their upcoming wedding. Lena stepped out of the bathroom to find Daniel standing by the window, staring out at the snow-covered peaks. The chalet was beautiful, all exposed timber and floor-to-ceiling windows, but isolated. They'd driven for hours up winding mountain roads to reach it, and the nearest village was at least 30 kilometers away. The solitude had seemed romantic when they arrived yesterday. Now, in the gray morning light, it felt oppressive. "The storm's getting worse," Daniel said without turning around. His voice sounded strange, flat. "When are the developers supposed to arrive?" Lena asked, moving to stand beside him. The snow was falling so thickly she could barely see the pine trees at the edge of the property. "They're not coming." Something in his tone made her stomach drop. "What do you mean? Did they cancel? Is it the weather?" Daniel finally turned to face her, and Lena felt her breath catch. The warmth she'd grown accustomed to seeing in his eyes was gone, replaced by something cold and distant. He looked at her the way a stranger might look at an inconvenient obstacle. "There are no developers, Lena. There never were." The words didn't make sense. She laughed nervously, waiting for the punchline, but his expression didn't change. "I don't understand." "I think you do." He walked to the sofa and sat down, completely at ease, as if they were discussing dinner plans. "There is no investment opportunity, There are no luxury chalets, there's just your 15,000 euros, which is currently sitting in an account in Cyprus, along with the money from 3 other women who were stupid enough to trust me. The room seemed to tilt. Lena gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "This is a joke," she whispered. "Daniel, this isn't funny." "It's not a joke." He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then held it up to show her. On the screen was a photograph of Daniel with a beautiful blonde woman, both smiling at the camera. The woman was wearing a ring identical to Lena's. "This is Nicole. We've been together for 4 years. We have a daughter. I'm driving back to them this afternoon." Lena's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "But we're engaged. We live together. You said—" "I said a lot of things." Daniel pocketed his phone and stood up. "I needed time to set everything up, to gain your complete trust. You're not the first, Lena. You won't be the last. This is what I do." "The apartment is a rental under a false name. I'll be gone before the lease is up." "Your job at the consulting firm doesn't exist." "None of it exists. Except Nicole and my daughter. They're real." Lena felt like she was drowning. 8 months of her life. 8 months of believing, trusting, planning a future. 8 months of falling in love with someone who had never existed. Why? The word came out broken. Why me? For the first time, something that might have been regret flickered across his face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You were perfect," he said simply. "Smart enough to have savings, lonely enough to be grateful for attention, trusting enough not to ask too many questions. And you loved me so completely that you would have given me anything I asked for." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Lena thought of all the times she'd defended him to her mother, who'd said he seemed too smooth. To her best friend, who'd warned her not to rush into things. To her own instincts, which had occasionally whispered that something felt off. She'd silenced every doubt because she wanted so desperately to be loved. "I want my money back." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Transfer it back right now, and I won't go to the police." Daniel laughed. Actually laughed. "You think I'm afraid of the police? By the time you get down this mountain and file a report, I'll be in another country with a different name. And your money will be gone, moved through so many accounts that you'll never trace it. I've done this before, Lena. I know how the game works." He walked toward the door, picking up a heavy jacket from the hook. "There's food in the kitchen. The caretaker will be back in 3 days to close up the property. You can catch a ride back to civilization with him. I'd recommend you tell everyone you called off the engagement because you realized we weren't compatible. Much less embarrassing than admitting you were scammed." He was actually leaving, walking away as if the past 8 months meant nothing. Lena stood on shaking legs. "Please." She hated the desperation in her voice, but couldn't stop it. "Please don't do this." "I'll forgive everything. We can work this out. Just give me back my money and we can—" "Lena." He cut her off, his voice almost gentle. "I never loved you. I'm incapable of loving anyone except Nicole and our daughter. You were a job. A very successful job, but still just a job. Let it go." Rage replaced the shock. Lena lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "You can't just leave me here. That money was everything I had. 5 years of my life." Daniel's expression hardened. He grabbed her wrist and twisted, not enough to seriously hurt, but enough to make her cry out and release him. "Don't make this ugly," he warned. "Take the loss and move on. Be grateful I'm leaving you alive and unharmed." "Unharmed?" Lena's voice rose to a shout. "You destroyed my life. You took everything. I took your money. You still have your health, your job, your family. You'll recover. They always do." The casual dismissal of her pain was more than Lena could bear. She grabbed a ceramic vase from the side table and hurled it at him. Daniel ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind him. "You psychopath!" she screamed. "I'll find you! I'll make sure everyone knows what you did!" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. In all their time together, Lena had never seen him truly angry. She saw it now. "You know what your problem is?" he said quietly, advancing toward her. "You don't know when to shut up and accept defeat." Lena backed away, suddenly aware of how isolated they were, how far from help, how completely alone. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did, and that's the problem." He grabbed her arm again, this time with bruising force, and began dragging her toward the back of the chalet. "Let me go!" Lena struggled, trying to pull free, but he was much stronger. Daniel, please! I gave you a clean exit, he said, his voice cold and controlled even as she fought him. I was going to leave you here with your dignity intact, but you had to push it. You had to threaten me. He pulled open a door that Lena hadn't noticed before. It looked like it belonged to a utility closet or storage area. But when Daniel reached inside and flicked a switch, harsh fluorescent light revealed something else entirely. It was a cold storage room, probably used for storing game or provisions when the chalet was occupied. The walls were thick metal, the floor concrete. A meat hook hung from the ceiling, and the temperature inside was visibly colder than the rest of the house. No. Lena's struggles became frantic. No, please, Daniel, don't. He shoved her inside with such force that she stumbled and fell, her hands skidding across the freezing concrete. Before she could scramble to her feet, the door was swinging shut. Daniel! She threw herself at the door, but it closed with a heavy thud. She heard something scrape on the other side. He was blocking it. Daniel, please, I'm sorry. I won't tell anyone, I promise. I actually believe you would have kept that promise. His voice came through the door, muffled but audible. 3 days ago. But now? Now you're angry. Now you want revenge. I can't trust you to stay quiet. I will. I swear I will. Just let me out. The caretaker will find you in 3 days. By then, I'll be long gone, and you'll be too hypothermic to remember much of anything clearly. You'll probably need medical attention, maybe have some frostbite, but you'll survive. Consider it a lesson about trusting the wrong people. 3 days? Lena's voice cracked. Daniel, I'll die in 3 days. It's freezing in here. The temperature is set to 4 degrees Celsius, unpleasant, but not immediately fatal. You're young and healthy. You'll make it. The storm. What if the caretaker can't get through the storm? There was a pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. That would be unfortunate. But honestly, Lena, at this point, that's not my problem. Daniel! She pounded on the door with both fists, ignoring the pain shooting through her hands. Daniel, please, I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? Another pause, then, no. She heard his footsteps walking away. Come back, come back! But there was only silence. Lena screamed until her throat was raw, pounded on the door until her hands were bruised and bleeding. She threw her weight against it again and again, but it didn't budge. Whatever he'd used to block it was heavy and secure. Finally, exhausted and sobbing, she slid down to the floor, her back against the cold metal wall. The reality of her situation began to sink in. She was trapped in a freezing room in an isolated chalet in the middle of a snowstorm. No one knew where she was. Her mother thought she was on a romantic getaway with her fiancé. Her friends thought the same. She'd told her principal she'd be back in 4 days. No one would miss her for at least 4 days. And by then, if the caretaker didn't come, if the storm didn't clear, if she couldn't find a way out, she would be dead. Lena pulled out her phone with shaking hands. No service. Of course there was no service. They were too high up, too remote. She'd noticed it when they arrived, but Daniel had laughed and called it romantic. Just us and the mountains, amor. No distractions. The temperature in the room was brutal. She could see her breath forming clouds in the air. Her thin sweater and jeans were laughably inadequate. She was already shivering, her teeth chattering so hard they clicked together. 4 degrees Celsius. That's what Daniel had said. Just above freezing. Not immediately fatal. But it was fatal eventually. She knew enough about hypothermia to know that. First, the shivering. Then the confusion, the drowsiness. Then unconsciousness. Then death. How long did she have? A day? 2 days? She didn't know. Lena pushed to her feet, forcing herself to move, to think. There had to be a way out. She examined every inch of the room, running her hands along the walls, looking for weaknesses, ventilation shafts, anything. There was nothing. The room was designed to keep cold in and everything else out. It was completely sealed except for the door, which was blocked from the outside. She tried the light switch. At least that worked. The harsh fluorescent glow was better than darkness, though it illuminated how small and hopeless her prison was. Maybe 3 meters by 4 meters. No windows. No tools. Just the meat hook hanging from the ceiling and her slowly freezing body. Time passed. She didn't know how long. Minutes felt like hours. The cold seeped into her bones, making movement painful. Her fingers and toes went numb first. She tried doing jumping jacks, running in place, anything to generate warmth, but exhaustion and the thin air at this altitude made it difficult to sustain. She thought about Daniel, about every moment they'd shared, every word he'd spoken, every touch, every kiss. Had any of it been real? Had he felt even a flicker of genuine affection, or had it all been performance? The worst part was that she'd given him everything. Not just her money, but her heart, her trust, her future. She'd introduced him to her family, made space for him in her life, planned a wedding. She'd loved him completely, without reservation. And he'd felt nothing, less than nothing. She'd been a job, a mark, a target. The humiliation was almost worse than the cold. Lena's phone lit up in her pocket, making her jump. She grabbed it desperately, hoping irrationally that service had somehow returned, but it was just the battery warning, 5% remaining. She stared at the screen, watching her own face reflected in the darkening glass. She looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, already half dead. The phone was useless. No service, dying battery, no one to call, even if she could. She was about to put it away when a memory surfaced. 6 weeks ago, she'd been having coffee in the faculty lounge when a coworker, Julia, a geography teacher, had leaned over and written something on a napkin. "This is going to sound crazy," Julia had said, her voice low. "But my cousin gave me this number. She said if I was ever in serious trouble, the kind where police can't help or won't get there in time, I should text this number. Just say what's wrong. Someone will help." Lena had laughed it off. "What, like a superhero hotline?" "I know how it sounds, but my cousin swears it's real. She was in a bad situation last year. Her ex was stalking her, had connections to local police. She couldn't get help through normal channels. She texted this number, and within 12 hours, the stalking stopped. Completely. The guy apparently got arrested on some unrelated charges and is now serving 5 years. She has no idea how it happened. Probably coincidence. Maybe. But take the number anyway, just in case." Lena had stuffed the napkin in her wallet, more to be polite than because she believed it. But now, with 4% battery left and death creeping closer with every passing minute, she dug through her wallet with numb fingers until she found it. The number was written in Julia's neat handwriting. No name, no context, just 10 digits. It was insane. It was probably a prank or a disconnected line, or worse, a scam to prey on desperate people. But what did she have to lose? With shaking fingers, she typed out a message. She tried to think of something that would convey the urgency, the danger, the absolute desperation of her situation. But her mind was getting foggy from the cold, her thoughts slow and scattered. In the end, she just typed the truth. "I'm so cold." She stared at the words on the screen. They seemed inadequate, pathetic even. But they captured everything: the cold storage room, Daniel's betrayal, the way her heart felt frozen in her chest. She hit send. The message showed as delivered. 3% battery. Lena waited, watching the screen, but no response came. Of course not. It was a dead end, like everything else. She was going to die here, and no mysterious number was going to save her. She closed her eyes, letting the phone fall from her numb fingers. Then it buzzed. Her eyes flew open. She grabbed the phone, almost dropping it in her haste. A response had appeared. "Don't close your eyes. I'm close." Lena stared at the words, certain she was hallucinating. It wasn't possible. She was in the middle of nowhere, at the top of a mountain, in a blizzard. No one was close. No one even knew where she was. She tried to type a response, but her fingers wouldn't cooperate. The phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the concrete floor. 2% battery. The cold was overwhelming now. She couldn't feel her hands or feet anymore. The shivering had intensified to the point where her whole body shook violently, uncontrollably. She thought about her mother, who would blame herself for not stopping the engagement. About her students, who would wonder why Signorina Valenti never came back from vacation. About all the things she'd never get to do, the life she'd never get to live. Time dissolved. She might have been in the cold storage room for hours or days. Everything felt distant, unreal. Her eyes kept drifting closed, despite the message telling her not to. Then, somewhere in the haze of approaching unconsciousness, she heard something. Metal grinding, scraping, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Lena tried to lift her head, but she couldn't move, couldn't think clearly enough to understand what the sound meant. The grinding grew louder, closer. Then, with a screech that seemed to come from very far away, light flooded the room. Not the harsh fluorescent light. This was different. Warmer. Accompanied by cold air and snow and the sound of the storm. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit so she couldn't see their face. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with calm purpose despite the chaos of the blizzard behind them. "Found you," a voice said, male, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "Stay with me now. You're going to be fine." Strong arms lifted her, and warmth, blessed, impossible warmth, enveloped her as something heavy was wrapped around her body. A coat, she realized distantly. Someone had given her their coat. "Cold," she mumbled against a solid chest. "So cold." "I know, I've got you." The world tilted and swayed as she was carried through the storm. She caught glimpses of things that didn't make sense. A large vehicle with chains on the tires, lights cutting through the snow, the chalet disappearing behind them. "Daniel," she tried to say, he took everything." "I know about Daniel," the voice said. "Don't worry about him. Just focus on staying awake." But staying awake was too hard. The warmth and the movement and the exhaustion pulled her down into darkness. The last thing she heard was that same voice, speaking to someone else. "Get us to the house. Fast. She's hypothermic, but she'll make it. She's stronger than she looks." Then nothing. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. Warmth, blessed, overwhelming warmth. Soft fabric against her skin. The smell of wood smoke and something medicinal. Voices speaking in low tones. Core temperature is rising. Stable now. How long was she in there? At least 6 hours, maybe more. Lena tried to open her eyes, but they felt weighted down. Her whole body felt heavy, sluggish, like she was moving through water. "She's waking up," the voice from the storm. She remembered it now. He'd come. The impossible message had been real. "Easy," the voice said, closer now. "Don't try to move yet. You're safe." Safe. The word felt foreign. Lena finally managed to open her eyes. She was in a bedroom, not the chalet, somewhere else. The walls were cream-colored, the furniture expensive-looking but understated. Large windows showed darkness outside, though whether it was still the same day or if days had passed, she couldn't tell. A man sat in a chair beside the bed, and when her vision focused, she felt her breath catch. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair and striking eyes. Gray or perhaps light blue, she couldn't quite tell in the dim light. His features were sharp, aristocratic, the kind of face that belonged on old Roman coins. He wore dark clothing, simple but clearly expensive, and he watched her with an intensity that was both unnerving and oddly comforting. "Who?" Her voice came out as a rasp. Her throat was raw from screaming. "Adrian Moretti," he said. He reached for a glass of water on the bedside table and held it to her lips. "Drink slowly." The water was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. She managed a few sips before he pulled it away. "More," she croaked. "In a minute. Too much too fast will make you sick." "How did you—" She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. "The message. Later. Right now you need to rest. The doctor said you'll be fine, but you came very close to severe hypothermia. Another few hours and—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Where am I?" "Milan. My home, Chol." Milan. That was at least 3 hours from the mountain chalet, probably more in a storm. How long had she been unconscious? "What day is it?" "Still Saturday. You've been out about 8 hours. It's evening now." Only 8 hours. It felt like a lifetime. "Daniel," she whispered, and felt tears begin to slide down her face. "He left me there to die." "I know." "He took everything. My money, my... everything." "I know that too." Lena looked at him through blurring vision. "How? How do you know? Who are you?" Adrian Moretti stood and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Milan spread below them. When he spoke, his voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "I've been tracking Daniel Russo, though that's not his real name, for 6 months. He's a professional con artist who specializes in romance fraud. You're the 4th woman he's targeted this year alone." The words hit like physical blows. Fourth, that we know of, there are probably more. Adrian turned back to face her. He has a pattern. He finds women who are financially stable but emotionally vulnerable, usually isolated in some way, either new to a city or recently out of a relationship. He builds trust quickly, creates a false identity, and eventually convinces them to invest in a fake business opportunity. Then he disappears. Lena closed her eyes, the humiliation washing over her again. "How much did he take from you?" Adrian asked gently. 15,000 euros. Everything I had saved. The woman before you lost 23,000. The one before her, 18,000. He's stolen nearly 200,000 euros in the past 2 years. The scope of it was staggering. And the police? Are investigating, but he's very careful. False identities, untraceable accounts, always moves between countries. By the time his victims realize they've been scammed and report it, he's already establishing his next identity somewhere else. Then how did you find him? Adrian walked back to the chair and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I have resources the police don't, and I have a personal interest in seeing him stopped. Why? Because the first woman he scammed 3 years ago was my sister. She lost her savings, and the betrayal destroyed her. She's still in therapy, still trying to rebuild her life. The pieces began to fit together. So you've been hunting him. Systematically, tracking his movements, identifying his victims, gathering evidence. I was close to having enough to ensure he'd be arrested and convicted when you appeared on my radar. I saw the engagement announcement, saw the same pattern developing, and knew I had to act fast. The number, my coworker's cousin, was another victim. I helped her with a different problem, and she's been sharing the number with women who might need it. I have a network of people who watch for these things, who help when they can. It was too much to process. Lena's head swam with questions, with implications, with the sheer impossibility of being rescued by someone who'd been tracking her fake fiancé for months. But how did you know where I was? The chalet is remote, and I didn't even know we were going there until yesterday. I've had someone watching Daniel for weeks. When you drove up this mountain yesterday, my team followed at a distance. When you didn't emerge this morning and Daniel left alone, we knew something had gone wrong. It took time to find you. The chalet is large and the storm was interfering with our equipment, but we found you. The door, Lena remembered suddenly. It was blocked. How did you... Crowbar and determination. The lock was industrial grade, but the door frame wasn't. We tore it out of the wall. She tried to imagine it. This elegant, controlled man tearing apart a door frame in a blizzard to rescue a stranger. It didn't fit with the composed person sitting beside her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was dying, if you hadn't come. But I did come, and you're safe now." Safe, but everything else was gone. Her savings, her relationship, her trust in her own judgment. She'd have to go back to her tiny apartment, face her family and friends, admit that she'd been spectacularly, humiliatingly wrong about everything. As if reading her thoughts, Adrian said quietly, "He's very good at what he does. This isn't your fault." "I gave him everything." Her voice broke. "I trusted him completely. I thought he loved me." That was his plan, to make you believe that. You're not stupid or naive, Lena. You're human, and he's a professional predator who knows exactly how to exploit that humanity. The kindness in his voice made her cry harder. This stranger had saved her life, had tracked her across a mountain in a blizzard, was sitting beside her and telling her it wasn't her fault, when everything in her screamed that it was. "What happens now?" she asked when she could speak again. Adrian's expression hardened, the gentleness replaced by something colder and more dangerous. "Now we decide if you want justice or just want to move on. Because I'm close to having everything I need to ensure Daniel goes to prison for a very long time. But the final piece requires your help, and it will mean facing him again." Lena's blood went cold at the thought. I can't see him again." "I understand, and if you choose to walk away, I'll make sure you get home safely, and you never have to think about this again. But if you choose to help, we can make sure he never does this to anyone else. We can recover your money and the money of every other woman he's stolen from. We can give you back your power." Power. She hadn't felt powerful in a very long time. Maybe ever. What would I have to do? For now, rest and recover. Let the doctor check you over tomorrow. Take time to think. And when you're ready, if you're ready, we'll talk about what comes next. He stood, clearly preparing to leave and let her sleep. Adrian? He paused at the door. Why are you doing this? I mean, I understand about your sister, but this seems like more than just revenge. You must spend tremendous resources, time, energy. For the first time, a slight smile crossed his face. Let's just say I have more resources than I know what to do with, and this gives them purpose. Sleep now. We'll talk more tomorrow. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Lena lay in the warm bed, in the beautiful room, in the home of a man who was essentially a stranger, but who had saved her life and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, she'd been engaged to Daniel Russo, planning a future, believing in love. Now Daniel was a con artist with a family. Her money was gone, and she was in the debt of a man who apparently made it his mission to hunt down people like the man she'd almost married. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting under the door. For a confused moment, Lena thought she was back in her apartment in Turin, that Daniel would call her from the kitchen any second, asking how she wanted her eggs. Then the events of yesterday crashed back into her consciousness with brutal clarity, and she squeezed her eyes shut against the memory. The cold storage room, the betrayal, the impossible rescue. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said, her voice still rough. A woman in her 50s entered, carrying a tray. She had kind eyes and wore simple professional clothing, clearly staff of some kind. "Good morning, Signorina Valenti. I'm Lucia, Mr. Moretti's housekeeper. I've brought breakfast and some clothes. The doctor will be here within the hour to examine you." Lena sat up slowly, relieved to find that her body, while sore and stiff, seemed to be functioning properly. "Thank you. Is Mr. Moretti here?" "He's in his study. He asked me to let him know when you're awake, if you're feeling up to talking." "I am, I think." Lucia set the tray across Lena's lap. Fresh bread, soft cheese, fruit, and espresso that smelled like heaven. "Eat first. You need your strength. I'll let him know you'll see him after the doctor's visit." The food was excellent, though Lena could only manage about half of it before her stomach protested. She showered in the attached bathroom, marveling at the luxury of heated marble floors and a rainfall showerhead, then examined the clothes Lucia had left. Designer labels, clearly expensive, but in her size. Someone had been very thorough. The doctor arrived promptly, a distinguished older man named Dr. Ferrara, who examined her with professional efficiency. He checked her extremities for frostbite, listened to her lungs, took her temperature and blood pressure. "You were very lucky," he said finally. "Minor frostbite on 3 toes of your left foot, but nothing that won't heal completely. No permanent damage to your hands. Your core temperature is normal now, and your lungs are clear. I'd like you to rest for a few more days, avoid strenuous activity, but you should make a full recovery." After he left, Lucia returned to guide Lena through the house. It was even more impressive in daylight, a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a building in what Lena recognized as one of Milan's most exclusive neighborhoods. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. The decor was modern but warm, with carefully chosen art on the walls and fresh flowers on every surface. Adrian's study was at the far end of the apartment, a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk with multiple monitors. He stood when Lena entered, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was locked in a freezer and left to die," Lena said bluntly. "Otherwise, fine." A flicker of approval crossed his face. "Sit, please. Can I get you anything? Water? Tea?" "Answers, maybe." Lena settled into the chair, studying him in the clear morning light. He looked like he hadn't slept. There were shadows under his eyes, and his shirt, while still crisp, was the same one he'd worn the night before. "Fair enough?" Adrian sat down, leaning back in his chair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with who you really are. You said you have resources. What does that mean?" "I come from money," he said simply. "Old money, the kind that's been in my family for generations. My grandfather built a manufacturing empire after the war. My father expanded it into finance and technology. I inherited it all when he died 5 years ago. And you spend your time hunting con artists? Among other things, I have excellent people running the businesses. That gives me the freedom to focus on projects that interest me. Like revenge? Like justice. His tone hardened slightly. What Daniel did to my sister wasn't just theft. It was psychological torture. She trusted him completely, planned a life with him, and he took everything, her money, her self-respect, her ability to trust anyone. When I found her 2 days after he disappeared, she'd taken enough pills to end her life. We got her to the hospital in time, but it was close. Lena felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry. So am I. And I made a promise to her that day that I would find him and make sure he faced consequences. It's taken 3 years, but I'm close now. 3 years is a long time to hunt one man. He's not the only one. There are others like him, other predators who slip through the cracks because their crimes are hard to prosecute or because their victims are too traumatized to testify. I've made it my business to stop as many as I can. Lena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the elegant businessman in front of her with the image of a vigilante hunting criminals. That sounds dangerous. Sometimes, but I'm careful, and I have help. Investigators, lawyers, people with specialized skills. We work within the law when possible, outside it when necessary. Outside it how? Adrian smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let's just say that some problems can be solved through creative use of existing legal frameworks. A well-placed tip to the right authority. Evidence that appears at the right moment. Pressure applied to the right people. I don't break laws, Lena. I just use them very, very effectively. There was something both admirable and unsettling about his calm certainty. This was a man accustomed to power, to making things happen through sheer force of will and resources. And Daniel? What's your plan for him? That depends on you. Adrian pulled a tablet from his desk and tapped it a few times before sliding it across to her. This is what we have so far. Lena looked at the screen. It showed a detailed dossier, photographs of Daniel with different women, bank records, fake identity documents, a timeline of his movements over the past 3 years. His real name is Marco Bellini, Adrian explained. Age 34, born in Naples. Started with small cons in his 20s, credit card fraud, identity theft. Graduated to romance fraud about 5 years ago when he realized it was more profitable and harder to prosecute. He has a partner, the woman he told you about, Nicole, who helps him research targets and create convincing false identities. Lena stared at a photograph of Daniel, Marco, with Nicole and a little girl who must be their daughter. They looked happy, normal, like any family you might see at a park or cafe. They have a child, she whispered. How can they? Sociopathy doesn't preclude family bonds. He can love his daughter and his partner while feeling absolutely nothing for his victims. They're just resources to him, means to an end. She scrolled through more documents, statements from other women he'd scammed, financial records showing the stolen money being moved through a complex web of accounts. You have all this evidence. Why can't the police arrest him? They can and they will once we have enough to ensure conviction. But romance fraud is tricky. Defense attorneys argue that the money was given willingly, that it was a relationship dispute rather than a crime. We need ironclad evidence of intent to defraud, of systematic deception. We need his victims willing to testify in detail, which many are too humiliated to do. And most importantly, we need to locate all the stolen money and prove the paper trail. And I can help with that? You can. You're his most recent victim, which means the money trail is freshest. You can provide testimony about exactly how he built trust, how he convinced you to invest, what promises he made. But more than that, Adrian paused, watching her carefully. You can help us catch him in the act. Lena's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Marco doesn't know we found you. As far as he's concerned, you're still locked in that cold storage room, and no one will find you for another 2 days. He thinks he has plenty of time to disappear, to establish his next identity. He's gotten complacent because he's never faced real consequences. So we use that. We make him think something has gone wrong, that he needs to access the money urgently. We pressure him into making mistakes, into exposing parts of his network that we haven't been able to track yet. And you're the key to making him believe it. Fear and anger warred in Lena's chest. The thought of having any contact with Daniel, Marco, made her skin crawl. But the thought of him doing this to someone else, of him walking free while she struggled to rebuild her shattered life, made her furious. What would I have to do? First, you'd need to stay here, out of sight, while we set things in motion. If he discovers you're alive and safe, he'll run immediately. Second, when the time is right, you'd need to contact him. Make him think you escaped, that you're coming after him. Make him panic. He'll just disappear like you said. Normally, yes, but we'll be ready. We'll track every move he makes, every person he contacts, every account he touches. And when he makes his run, we'll have everything we need to ensure he goes to prison for a very long time. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she handed the tablet back. When you say stay here, how long are we talking about? A week? Maybe 2? I know it's a lot to ask. You have a life, a job, family, who'll worry. Actually, Lena interrupted, surprised by the bitterness in her own voice, I don't have much of a life to get back to. My mother lives in Rome. We talk once a week, and I already told her I'd be away. My school thinks I'm on vacation. I have friends, but no one who'll panic if I don't answer texts for a few days. Daniel made sure I was isolated. It made me easier to manipulate. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's the truth. And maybe that makes this easier. She met his eyes, feeling something harden inside her. I'll do it. I'll help you catch him. Are you sure? Because once we start this, there's no going back. He'll know you betrayed him. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Lena said firmly. You've been planning this for 3 years. You saved my life, and I want him to pay for what he did. Not just to me, but to your sister and everyone else. So yes, I'm sure. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, then we begin. Over the next 3 days, Lena was introduced to Adrian's team. There was Marco, confusingly sharing the con artist's real name, though he went by Rossi to avoid confusion, a former police detective in his 50s who now worked as a private investigator. Elena, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who specialized in financial fraud and could trace money through the most convoluted networks. And Dante, a tech specialist who looked barely old enough to drive, but who could apparently hack anything with an internet connection. They treated Lena with respect, but also with a kind of careful distance, as if they'd seen too many victims fall apart to invest emotionally. Only Adrian showed warmth, checking on her regularly, making sure she was comfortable, explaining each step of the plan in detail. The key, he told her during one of their evening conversations, is to make Marco believe he's in control while actually having no control at all. He's used to being the one pulling strings, manipulating emotions. We're going to turn that against him. They were sitting in Adrian's living room, watching the sun set over Milan. Lena had discovered that she liked this time of day best, when the team had gone home and it was just her and Adrian talking about the case or sometimes about other things. She'd learned that he collected rare books, that he'd studied philosophy at university before being pulled into the family business, that he played piano though he claimed to be terrible at it. Tell me about your sister, Lena said now, if you don't mind talking about it. Adrian was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. Isabella is 4 years younger than me. Growing up, she was the light of our family, outgoing, optimistic, trusting. She worked as a nurse, loved helping people. When she met Marco, she thought she'd found someone who shared her values, who wanted to build something meaningful. How long were they together? 9 months. He took his time with her, really built the foundation, introduced her to his family, actors he'd hired to play parents and siblings, showed her fake business documents, even took her to look at houses they'd supposedly buy together. Adrian's jaw tightened. The money he stole from her was meant to be the down payment on that house, 35,000 euros. That's more than he took from me. He's getting greedier, or more confident, maybe both. Adrian looked at her. After Isabella's suicide attempt, she fell into a deep depression. It took months of therapy before she could even leave the apartment. She still struggles with trust, with relationships. She's better now, but she'll never be who she was before Marco. Is she part of this? The hunt for him? No, she knows I'm looking for him, but I've kept her separate from the active investigation. She deserves peace, not revenge. But you deserve revenge. I deserve justice. There's a difference. Lena wasn't sure she agreed, but she understood. She'd spent the past 3 days feeling her own desire for revenge building, hot and insistent. She wanted Daniel, Marco, to suffer the way he'd made her suffer. She wanted him to feel the cold, the fear, the absolute helplessness. But more than that, she wanted him stopped. She wanted to know that no other woman would get that phone call, make that drive to an isolated chalet, trust those lies. On the fourth day, Rossi came to the apartment with news. He's moving, faster than expected. He's already started transferring your money, Lena, breaking it up and sending it through the network. If we don't act soon, we'll lose the trail. Adrian turned to Lena. Are you ready? Her heart pounded, but she nodded. What do I do? Elena set up her laptop on the dining table. We've created a secure line that appears to come from a burner phone purchased near the chalet. You're going to call Marco and tell him you escaped. You're injured, you're angry, and you're going to the police. We need him to panic enough to make mistakes, but not so much that he bolts immediately. How do I walk that line? By being honest, Adrian said. Channel everything you're feeling, the betrayal, the rage, the hurt. Make him believe you're acting on pure emotion rather than strategy. Men like him underestimate emotional women. They think feelings make people stupid. Use that. Lena took a deep breath. Okay, I can do that. They set up recording equipment, traced the call route multiple times to ensure it couldn't be tracked back to Adrian's apartment, and went over what Lena should and shouldn't say. Then, with everyone watching, she dialed the number she'd called so many times over the past 8 months. It rang 4 times before Daniel, she still thought of him as Daniel, answered. Who is this? His voice was sharp, suspicious. He wouldn't have recognized the number. It's Lena. She let her voice shake, let the fear and anger bleed through. Did you really think I'd die in there? Dead silence. She could almost hear his mind racing. Lena. He recovered quickly, his tone shifting to concern. Thank heaven you're all right. I've been so worried. Don't. The word came out savage. Don't you dare pretend to care. I know everything, Daniel. Or should I call you Marco? Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, the concern was gone, replaced by cold calculation. How did you get out? The caretaker came early, found me half frozen and barely conscious, took me to a hospital. The lie came easily, just as they'd rehearsed. They wanted to call the police, but I convinced them to let me go. I told them my fiancé and I had a fight, that you locked me in as a cruel joke, but you'd come back for me. That was smart. I'm not finished. I'm coming after you, Marco. I'm going to find you, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you are. Your partner, your daughter, every person you've ever conned, they're all going to know. Lena, listen to me. No, you listen to me. I trusted you. I loved you. I gave you everything, and you tried to kill me. You don't get to talk your way out of this. I didn't try to kill you. The caretaker was coming. You were never in real danger. The audacity of the lie took her breath away. I could barely feel my hands. My lips were blue. Another few hours and I'd have been dead. But you're not dead. You're fine. And if you're smart, you'll let this go. Walk away, Lena. Forget this ever happened. Forget? Forget that you stole my life savings? That you left me to freeze? Think about what you're saying. His voice dropped, became almost gentle. If you go to the police, you'll have to admit that you were stupid enough to give me all your money. You'll have to tell everyone, your family, your colleagues, your students, that you fell for a con. Is that really what you want? The humiliation? Rage flooded through her, hot and clean. You think I care about being embarrassed? You tried to kill me. I didn't. He cut himself off, regrouped. What do you want, Lena? Money? I can give you money. I want my money. All of it, every euro you stole. That's not possible. It's already been invested, moved through channels. I couldn't recover it all, even if I wanted to. Then I'm going to the police. Today. Right now. Wait. Desperation crept into his voice. Just wait. Give me 24 hours. I can get you some of it back, maybe half. But I need time to access the accounts, to liquidate certain assets. 24 hours, Lena. Then you can do whatever you want. Lena looked at Adrian, who nodded. Fine. 24 hours. But if you run, if you try to disappear, I swear I will spend the rest of my life hunting you down. I won't run. I promise. Just give me 1 day. She hung up without responding. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. Perfect, Elena said immediately, her fingers flying across her keyboard. He's moving. Just access 3 different accounts. Dante, are you tracking? Got him, Dante confirmed from his own laptop. He's panicking, just like you said, making calls, sending messages, not being nearly as careful as usual. Adrian squeezed Lena's shoulder. You did beautifully. He believed every word. Because it was all true, Lena said quietly. I didn't have to act. I just had to remember how it felt. Over the next 24 hours, Lena watched Adrian's team work with impressive precision. They tracked every call Marco made, every account he accessed, every movement of money through the network. Elena mapped out connections they hadn't known existed, shell corporations, offshore accounts, even other con artists Marco occasionally worked with. He's building an exit strategy, Rossi observed, studying the data, planning to move the bulk of the money to a final account and then vanish. Probably has new identity documents ready, plane tickets, everything. Where's he planning to go? Adrian asked. Argentina, looks like. He's been researching it anyway. Flights, apartments, areas with minimal extradition treaties. We can't let him get on a plane, Lena said. If he leaves the country, he won't, Adrian assured her. We're coordinating with law enforcement now. They'll move in before he gets anywhere near an airport. But as the 24-hour deadline approached, something changed. Marco stopped responding to Lena's messages. His phone went dark. The financial activity ceased. He knows, Elena said grimly. Somehow he figured it out. How? Dante demanded. We were careful. There's no way he could have traced the call or... He doesn't need to trace anything, Adrian interrupted. He's smart, and he's survived this long by trusting his instincts. Something about Lena's call felt wrong to him, and he's going to ground. Lena felt panic rising. So he gets away? After everything? No. Adrian's voice was hard. We adjust. Rossi, where was he last active? His apartment in Como. Small place, registered under another false name. How long to get there? Hour and a half, maybe 2, with traffic. Adrian stood, already pulling on his jacket. Lena, stay here. If this goes wrong, I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It could be dangerous. I don't care. This is my fight, too. I deserve to see him face consequences. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Adrian nodded. Fine. But you stay in the car unless I say otherwise. Understood? Understood. The drive to Como was tense and silent. Rossi drove while Adrian made calls, coordinating with the police, ensuring they'd have backup if needed. Lena sat in the back seat, watching the countryside blur past and trying to calm her racing heart. The apartment was in a nondescript building in a working-class neighborhood, exactly the kind of place someone trying to stay under the radar would choose. They parked down the street, and Rossi went to check if Marco's car was still there. He came back within minutes. Car's gone. Building manager says the tenant left about an hour ago with suitcases. Paid cash for the remainder of the lease and said he got a job opportunity abroad. Damn it! Adrian pulled out his phone. Elena, check traffic cameras, train stations, anywhere he might have gone. Dante, see if he's accessed any accounts in the last hour. While they worked, Lena stared at the building where Marco had been living. Had he brought other women here? Made promises to them in those rooms? Or was this just another temporary station in his endless cycle of reinvention? Got something, Elena's voice came through the phone's speaker. Traffic camera caught his car heading toward Lugano 40 minutes ago. Switzerland, Rossi muttered. Of course. Can we catch him before he crosses the border? Adrian asked. Not unless we leave right now, and he hits traffic. They were back in the car and speeding toward the Swiss border within seconds. Lena's heart pounded as Rossi wove through traffic, pushing the car as fast as he dared. If Marco made it across the border, everything became infinitely more complicated. Switzerland had strict banking privacy laws, extradition processes that could take months or years. There, Rossi said suddenly, pointing ahead. Silver sedan, just like Elena described. Lena leaned forward and saw it. Marco's car, 3 vehicles ahead in the line approaching the border crossing. What do we do? She asked. We can't just grab him here. Watch, Adrian said calmly. He made a phone call, spoke rapidly in Italian too fast for Lena to follow, then hung up. Within minutes, police vehicles appeared, pulling up beside Marco's car just as he reached the border checkpoint. Officers approached, showed their badges, began speaking to him through the window. Lena held her breath as the scene unfolded. She could see Marco's face now, could see the moment he realized it was over. He looked around wildly, as if calculating escape routes, but there were none. The officers opened his door, helped him out with firm hands on his arms. "They're arresting him," she whispered. "For fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder," Adrian confirmed. "We provided them with everything we had. The evidence is overwhelming." One of the officers began searching Marco's car while another handcuffed him. Marco's eyes swept across the gathered vehicles, and for one terrible moment, they landed on Adrian's car. On Lena. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by shock, then rage. He said something to the officers, gesturing toward their car, but they ignored him. "He sees me," Lena said. "Let him," Adrian replied. "Let him know exactly who brought him down." They watched as Marco was placed in a police vehicle, still protesting, still trying to talk his way out. But this time, there was no escape. No charm or lies that would save him. As the police car drove away, Lena felt something release in her chest. It wasn't quite relief, wasn't quite satisfaction. It was something more complex, a sense that justice, while it couldn't undo the harm, could at least prevent future harm. "It's really over," she said. "This part is," Adrian agreed. "Now comes the prosecution, the recovery of funds, the process of ensuring he stays locked up. But yes, the hunt is over." Lena leaned back in her seat, exhausted and wired at the same time. "What happens to me now?" Adrian turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "That depends. What do you want to happen?" It was a good question. She'd spent so much energy on survival and then on revenge that she hadn't thought beyond this moment. She had no home. She'd given up her apartment when she moved in with Daniel. No savings. Her job would be waiting, but returning to her old life felt impossible now. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything I had planned was built on a lie. I have to start over completely." "You could stay in Milan," Adrian said carefully. "Work with us. We could use someone who understands what victims go through, who can talk to them, help them testify." "This isn't the only case we're working on." Lena looked at him in surprise. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose, and a place to stay while you figure out what you want." It was insane. She barely knew him. A week ago, she'd never heard his name, but he'd saved her life, had helped her reclaim her power, had shown her that the world contained people who fought against predators rather than being predators themselves. And she realized she wasn't ready to say goodbye to that. Not yet. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I'll stay." The first week working with Adrian's team felt like drinking from a fire hose. Lena had expected something structured, perhaps an office with clear roles and procedures. Instead, she found herself thrown into the controlled chaos of active investigations, learning on the fly as Rossi, Elena, and Dante worked cases that ranged from financial fraud to missing persons to corporate espionage. "We're not quite legal and not quite illegal," Elena explained one morning as she showed Lena how to trace Shell Corporation ownership through public records. "We operate in the gray areas where traditional law enforcement can't or won't go. Everything we gather is admissible in court, but how we gather it sometimes requires creative interpretation of privacy laws." "Meaning you hack into things," Lena said. "Meaning Dante occasionally finds open doors that were carelessly left unlocked," Elena corrected with a slight smile. "And we happen to walk through them." Lena discovered she had a knack for the work, particularly for interviewing victims. Her own experience gave her credibility that opened doors Rossi's gruff professionalism couldn't. When she sat across from a woman who'd lost her retirement savings to an investment scam, or a man whose business partner had embezzled and disappeared, she could speak their language. She knew the shame, the anger, the desperate need for someone to acknowledge that what happened to them mattered. "You're good at this," Adrian told her one evening as they reviewed her notes from an interview with a domestic abuse survivor. "Better than I expected." They were in his study again, a space Lena had come to associate with late nights and strong coffee and the satisfaction of puzzles slowly coming together. It was nearly midnight, but neither of them seemed tired. "I just tell them the truth," Lena said, "that I've been where they are. That it gets better, but only if you fight for it." "Does it? Get better, I mean." She considered the question. 2 weeks had passed since Marco's arrest, and while the prosecutor was building a case that looked increasingly solid, Lena still woke sometimes in the middle of the night, heart racing, remembering the cold, remembering Daniel's face as he locked the door. "It gets different," she said finally. "The sharp edges wear down, but I don't think I'll ever fully trust my own judgment again. Not the way I did before." Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Blind trust is dangerous. Informed caution keeps you alive. Is that what you have? Informed caution? Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. I have control, or at least the illusion of it. I've structured my life so that very few people can hurt me, and those who can are carefully vetted. That sounds lonely. Sometimes. But safe. Lena thought about the past 2 weeks living in his home, working with his team. She'd seen him interact with dozens of people. Investigators, lawyers, police contacts, victims seeking help. He was unfailingly professional, occasionally warm, but there was always distance. Even with his own team, people who'd worked with him for years, there was a line they didn't cross. Only with her did that line occasionally blur. Late-night conversations that veered from cases to philosophy to personal history. The way he checked on her, not just professionally but genuinely, asking if she was sleeping, if the nightmares were getting better, if she needed anything. The moments when she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Your sister, Lena said, changing the subject before her thoughts went somewhere dangerous. Have you told her about Marco's arrest? I called her the day it happened. She cried for an hour. Relief? I think so. And maybe some closure, though I'm not sure closure is really possible for something like that. He paused. She wants to meet you. Lena's eyes widened. Me? Why? Because you helped catch him. Because you survived him. She said talking to someone who'd been through something similar might help her feel less alone. Adrian's expression softened slightly. You don't have to, of course. I told her I'd ask, but there's no pressure. No, I'd like to meet her. I'd like that very much. They arranged the meeting for the following Sunday at a cafe in central Milan. Isabella Moretti turned out to be a slender woman with dark hair like her brother's, but softer features and eyes that held old pain poorly concealed behind a brave smile. Thank you for agreeing to this, Isabella said as they settled at a corner table. Adrian had offered to join them, but both women had insisted on meeting alone. I know it must be strange talking to the sister of the man who saved you. It's not strange, Lena assured her. I'm grateful for the chance. Your brother told me a little about what happened to you, but I'd like to hear it from you if you're comfortable sharing. Over espresso that went cold as they talked, Isabella told her story. It was painfully similar to Lena's, the charming man who appeared when she was vulnerable, the gradual building of trust, the investment opportunity that seemed too good to refuse. But Isabella's story had an additional layer of cruelty. Marco had faked a pregnancy scare, convinced her to take out a loan for a medical procedure, then disappeared with both her savings and the borrowed money. I tried to end my life 3 times, Isabella said quietly. The first time Adrian found me. The second time my therapist talked me down. The third time I realized I was giving Marco exactly what he wanted. For me to disappear, to stop being a problem. That's when I decided to live, if only to spite him. And now? Lena asked gently. Now I work as a nurse again. I have an apartment, a cat, a small circle of friends who know everything and love me anyway. I'm in therapy twice a week. I take medication for anxiety and depression. And I'm okay. Not healed, but okay. That's more than okay. That's surviving. Adrian said you're working with his team now. Yes. It turns out I'm reasonably good at it. And it helps somehow, knowing that we're preventing other people from going through what we went through. Isabella reached across the table and took Lena's hand. Can I tell you something Adrian probably wouldn't want me to say? Of course. He's different with you, lighter, less consumed by the hunt. I haven't seen him like this since before our father died. Isabella's grip tightened slightly. He spent 5 years building walls around himself, convinced that control and distance equal safety. But you got past those walls somehow. Don't hurt him, please. He acts invincible, but he's not. The weight of the confession hung between them. Lena didn't know what to say. She'd been so focused on her own recovery, her own transformation, that she hadn't stopped to consider what she might mean to Adrian beyond being a victim he'd saved and a useful team member. I would never hurt him intentionally, Lena said finally. He saved my life. I know. But sometimes the worst hurts aren't intentional. Isabella released her hand and sat back. Ignore me. I'm overprotective. Adrian would be mortified if he knew I was having this conversation. Then we won't tell him. They talked for another hour, sharing stories and strategies for managing trauma, swapping therapist recommendations and dark humor that only fellow survivors could fully appreciate. When they parted, Lena felt like she'd gained something precious, a connection with someone who truly understood. The next few weeks brought significant developments in Marco's case. Elena had traced nearly all of Lena's 15,000 euros, along with substantial portions of money stolen from his other victims. The total reached almost 200,000 euros, spread across 12 different accounts in 6 countries. The prosecutors are saying this is one of the most well-documented romance fraud cases they've ever seen, Rossi reported during a team meeting. Your testimony, combined with the financial evidence and the attempted murder charge from the cold storage incident, means Marco is looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. What about Nicole? Lena asked. His partner. She's trying to cut a deal, Elena said. Claims she didn't know the full extent of what he was doing, that she thought the women were willing participants in some kind of financial arrangement. It's nonsense, obviously. Bank records show she helped set up the shell corporations and move the money. But her lawyer is good. Will she get away with it? Reduced sentence, probably, maybe 5 years instead of 15, but she'll serve time. It should have felt like victory, but Lena found herself oddly empty. Intellectually, she knew justice was being served. Marco would go to prison, the money would be recovered and returned to his victims, and he'd never be able to hurt anyone else this way. But it didn't erase the 8 months she'd lost, the trust that had been shattered, the version of herself who'd believed in fairy tales. Adrian found her that night on the apartment's terrace, staring out at the glittering city lights. Rossi told me about the prosecutor's assessment, he said, joining her at the railing. This is good news. Why don't you look happy? I don't know. I should be happy. Marco's going to prison. I'm getting my money back. I have meaningful work. Everything worked out. But none of it changes what happened. I still fell for his lies. I still let him isolate me from my life. I still handed over everything I'd worked for because I was so desperate to be loved that I ignored every warning sign. You weren't desperate, Adrian said quietly. You were human. And humans are wired to trust, to hope, to want connection. Marco weaponized those instincts against you. That's not your failure. It's his. Everyone keeps saying that. You, Isabella, my therapist. But I can't shake the feeling that I should have known, should have seen through him. That he's a professional con artist who'd been perfecting his technique for years. You're a history teacher. The odds were never in your favor. Despite herself, Lena laughed. When you put it that way, it sounds almost reasonable. It is reasonable. And even if you had seen through him earlier, even if you'd ended things after the first red flag, he still would have been out there scamming someone else. The only failure here belongs to the man who chose to hurt people for profit. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching traffic move through the streets below like blood through veins, keeping the city alive. Can I ask you something personal? Lena said. You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Why do you really do this? Hunt people like Marco. And don't say it's just about Isabella, because I think it's more than that. Adrian was quiet for so long that Lena thought he might invoke his right not to answer. Then he sighed. My father built an empire by being ruthless. Not illegal, but ruthless. He believed that business was war and casualties were inevitable. When I was young, I admired that. Thought strength meant crushing anyone who stood in your way. He paused, his jaw tightening. Then I watched what that philosophy did to him. He died alone, surrounded by business associates who pretended to mourn, but were really just calculating how to divide his assets. No real friends. No one who loved him for anything other than his money. He'd won every battle and lost everything that mattered. And you didn't want to become him. I didn't want to waste the power and resources he'd built. So I decided to use them differently. To help people who couldn't help themselves. To stop predators who slipped through the cracks of conventional justice. It's not altruism. I'm not that noble. It's control. I can't fix the whole world, but I can fix small pieces of it. And that makes the rest bearable. Lena turned to look at him, really look at him. In the ambient light from the city, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful and severe at the same time. You act like it's selfish, but it's not. You saved my life, Adrian. You've saved dozens of lives. That matters, even if you're doing it for complicated reasons. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to prove I'm different from my father while using all the tools he gave me. Maybe that makes me a hypocrite. It makes you human. Like me, like Isabella, like everyone who's trying to be better than their worst impulses. Something shifted in his expression, softening the hard edges. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so gentle it made Lena's breath catch. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "Do you know that? 2 weeks ago you were locked in a freezer waiting to die. Now you're interviewing victims, building cases, fighting for justice. Most people would still be in bed, paralyzed by trauma. I had a good teacher and good motivation." "What motivation?" "Spite, mostly. I refused to let Marco win by destroying me. And..." She hesitated, then decided to be brave. "And I wanted to be someone you'd be proud to work with." His hand was still near her face, and now his thumb brushed her cheek. "Lena." The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She could close the distance between them so easily. Just lean forward, rise on her toes, and... Adrian's phone buzzed, shattering the tension. He pulled back, checking the screen, and his expression shifted to professional concern. "It's Rossi. There's been a development." He answered the call, listened for a moment, then swore softly. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. "What happened?" Lena asked as they headed back inside. "Marco's lawyer just filed a motion claiming his arrest was illegal, that we entrapped him and the evidence is inadmissible. He's trying to get the case thrown out." The next several hours were a blur of emergency meetings with prosecutors, reviewing documentation, ensuring every step of their investigation could withstand legal scrutiny. Marco's lawyer was arguing that Lena's phone call had constituted entrapment, that Adrian's team had acted as unlicensed law enforcement, that the financial evidence had been obtained through illegal surveillance. "It's all nonsense," the lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Francesca, assured them. But good nonsense. His lawyer knows the case is solid, so he's throwing everything at the wall hoping something sticks. "We'll defeat the motion, but it's going to delay trial by several months." "Several months," Lena repeated. "But the other victims, some of them need that money to survive." "I know. I'm sorry. But the system moves slowly, especially when the defense is well-funded and motivated." As they left the prosecutor's office, Lena felt frustration burning in her chest. How does he have money for a good lawyer? We froze his accounts. "He probably has money we haven't found yet," Elena said grimly. "Or Nicole is funding his defense. Either way, this is going to be a longer fight than we hoped." Back at Adrian's apartment, the team dispersed to start building responses to each of the lawyer's claims. Lena found herself alone in the study, reviewing her own testimony for any potential weaknesses. She was so absorbed in the documents that she didn't hear Adrian enter until he spoke. "You should get some sleep. This will still be here tomorrow." "I can't sleep knowing there's a chance he might get away with this." "He won't. Francesca is excellent at her job, and we have overwhelming evidence. This is just a delaying tactic." "But what if it works? What if some technicality lets him walk free?" Adrian moved to stand beside her, looking down at the scattered papers. "Then we adapt. Find another way to stop him. I've been doing this long enough to know that justice isn't always straightforward, but it's usually possible if you're patient and creative enough." "I don't feel patient. I feel angry." "Good. Use that anger. Channel it into making our case bulletproof." Lena looked up at him, at the man who'd appeared in a blizzard and changed everything. "Can I ask you something else?" "Another personal question?" "Earlier on the terrace, were you going to kiss me?" The directness of it seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, the careful control slipped and she saw something raw and uncertain in his eyes. "Would you have wanted me to?" he asked instead of answering. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." She stood, moving closer to him. "But I need to understand what this is, what we are, because I've spent 2 months thinking I was in a relationship when I was actually a mark. I can't afford to misread signals again." "You're not misreading anything." Adrian's voice was rough. "I'm attracted to you. Have been since you woke up in my guest room and demanded answers, instead of collapsing into helpless gratitude. But acting on that attraction would be monumentally stupid. Why? Because you're vulnerable. You're recovering from trauma. You're living in my home, working for me, financially dependent on me. The power dynamics are all wrong. If something happened between us and it ended badly, you'd be hurt again. And I refuse to be another person who takes advantage of you when you're not in a position to make clear choices. The words stung, even though Lena understood the logic behind them. So you've decided what I can and can't handle? What I'm ready for? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need honesty. If you're not interested, say so. But don't hide behind noble concern about power dynamics. I am interested, Adrian said, his control fracturing. I'm so interested it's affecting my judgment. I think about you constantly. I find excuses to work late just so we can have these conversations. I nearly had Rossi removed from the team when he suggested you might be more comfortable staying at a hotel. So yes, Lena, I'm interested. But that doesn't mean acting on it is the right thing to do. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Lena's pulse raced. What if I told you I'm interested too? That it's not gratitude or trauma bonding or confusion, but genuine attraction to a complicated, controlling man who saves people because he couldn't save his father? I'd say you deserve better than a complicated, controlling man. Maybe I don't want better. Maybe I want real. They stared at each other, the air thick with tension. This time it was Lena who closed the distance. She rose on her toes and kissed him, half expecting him to pull away, to maintain his noble distance. Instead, his arms came around her, pulling her closer. The kiss was nothing like the careful pecks Daniel had given her. It was intense, almost desperate, like Adrian had been holding back for weeks and finally let go. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably. We should establish boundaries, keep things professional." "Absolutely." Neither of them moved away. "I'm still going to worry about the power dynamics," Adrian said, "and I'm still going to tell you when you're being overprotective. We'll figure it out." He pulled back enough to look at her properly. "I don't do casual relationships. If we do this, I'm all in, completely. And that comes with complications you might not want to deal with." "Like what?" "Like the fact that my life involves danger sometimes. Like the fact that I have enemies who might try to use you against me. Like the fact that I'm possessive and demanding and I've been told I'm difficult to be with." "Who told you that?" "Everyone who's ever dated me." Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Lena smiled. "Good thing I'm difficult too. We'll match." Adrian shook his head, but he was smiling now. "You're going to be the death of me. Better than being the death of myself in a cold storage room." The dark humor of it made him laugh, a sound Lena realized she'd rarely heard. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "Okay," he said finally, "we try this. Carefully. And the moment you feel pressured or uncomfortable or like the power dynamics are problematic, you tell me, immediately. No protecting my feelings. Deal. And you stop trying to make decisions for me about what I can handle." "I'll try. Old habits are hard to break." They sealed the agreement with another kiss, slower this time, exploratory. When they finally separated, Adrian's phone buzzed again. "If that's another legal crisis, I'm throwing this phone off the terrace," he muttered, checking the screen. His expression shifted. "It's Isabella. She wants to know if we can meet her for lunch tomorrow, both of us." "She knows?" "Isabella has always been perceptive, too perceptive, usually." He typed a response. "I'm telling her yes." "Are you ready to face her knowing looks and probably embarrassing commentary?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The lunch the next day was exactly as awkward and wonderful as Lena had anticipated. Isabella took one look at them arriving together and grinned. "Finally," she said. "I was beginning to think Adrian was going to noble himself into loneliness forever." "Isabella," Adrian warned. "What?" "I'm happy for you. Both of you." She turned to Lena. "Just promise me you'll call me when he gets too controlling and needs someone to tell him to back off. He won't listen to me, but he might listen to you." "I'm sitting right here," Adrian protested. "We know," both women said in unison, then laughed. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything and nothing. The case, yes, but also books and travel and Isabella's new apartment and whether Lena should cut her hair. It felt normal and easy and like something Lena hadn't had in years, family. On the way home, Adrian reached for her hand. Thank you. For what? For making Isabella laugh like that. She hasn't been this relaxed in years. She's wonderful. I can see why you're so protective of her. She thinks the same about you, you know. She told me you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. And if I mess this up, she'll never forgive me. Smart woman. A terrifying woman, Adrian corrected. I'm far more afraid of disappointing her than I am of most criminals. The next weeks found them settling into a new rhythm. Lena continued working cases, growing more confident in her abilities. Adrian remained intense and controlling, but was learning to step back when Lena pushed for independence. They navigated the complications of working together and being together, establishing boundaries that mostly worked. The legal battle over Marco's case dragged on, but Francesca dismantled each of the defense's arguments methodically. The entrapment claim failed because Lena had been a genuine victim making a genuine call. The illegal surveillance claim failed because all financial records had been obtained through legal channels or voluntary disclosure. The unlicensed law enforcement claim failed because Adrian's team had always worked in cooperation with official authorities. Finally, 5 months after his arrest, Marco's trial date was set. You'll need to testify, Francesca told Lena during a preparation meeting. Your account of what happened in the cold storage room is crucial for the attempted murder charge, and your testimony about how he built trust and convinced you to invest establishes the fraud pattern. Are you ready for that? Lena thought about facing Marco across a courtroom, having to recount every humiliating detail of how he'd fooled her. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. Adrian squeezed her hand under the table, a gesture of support that had become familiar over the past months. The trial was scheduled to begin in 3 weeks, and then, finally, Lena would have the chance to tell her story and watch Marco face the consequences he'd evaded for so long. The night before the trial, Lena couldn't sleep. She'd practiced her testimony dozens of times with Francesca, had reviewed every detail until the words felt mechanical. But now, lying in the darkness of Adrian's guest room, she'd insisted on maintaining separate bedrooms despite their relationship, needing that independence. The reality of what tomorrow meant pressed down on her chest like a physical weight. She would have to look at Marco, would have to sit across from him in a courtroom and recount, in excruciating detail, how completely he'd fooled her. The defense attorney would try to make her look stupid, desperate, complicit even. Francesca had warned her about all of it. They'll suggest you knew it was too good to be true, the prosecutor had explained. They'll imply you were a willing participant who changed your mind after things ended badly. They'll paint you as vindictive, as someone seeking revenge on an ex-lover rather than a victim seeking justice. You need to be prepared for that. Lena had nodded, had assured everyone she could handle it. But now, alone in the dark, she wasn't sure. A soft knock on her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Come in, she called quietly. Adrian entered wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking uncharacteristically rumpled. I saw your light was still on. Couldn't sleep? Turns out facing your attempted murder in court is bad for insomnia. He sat on the edge of her bed, and without hesitation, Lena moved into his arms. Over the past months, they'd learned each other's comfort languages. Adrian showed care through action and protection. Lena showed it through words and presence. Both had learned to accept what the other offered. You don't have to do this, Adrian said, though they both knew it was a lie. We have enough evidence without your testimony to convict him on fraud charges. But not attempted murder, and I want that charge to stick. I want him to serve maximum time. I know. I just hate that you have to relive it all. So do I. But it's worth it if it means he can't do this to anyone else. She pulled back to look at him. Will you be there? In the courtroom? Every single day, front row. And if his lawyer gets too aggressive with you, I'll have him investigated for every parking ticket he's ever gotten. Despite her anxiety, Lena smiled. Abuse of power much? Absolutely. I never claimed to be a good person. You're a good person who does questionable things for good reasons. There's a difference. He kissed her forehead. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long, and you need to be sharp. But even after he left, sleep remained elusive. Lena finally gave up around 4 in the morning and went to the kitchen to make coffee. She found Isabella already there, sitting at the counter with her own cup. "Couldn't sleep either?" Lena asked. "I wanted to be here for your first day of testimony. Adrian told me you'd probably be up early, anxiety-ridden, and pretending to be fine." Isabella poured Lena a cup. "So I came to tell you something important." "What's that?" "That you're going to walk into that courtroom and destroy him. Not with rage or revenge, but with the simple, devastating truth of what he did. And when you walk out, you're going to be free of him in a way you've never been free before." "How do you know?" "Because I testified against my abuser 2 years ago. Not Marco, he had already disappeared by then, but the therapist who took advantage of my vulnerability after Marco left. And I was terrified, just like you are now. But the moment I started speaking, something shifted. I realized he had no power over me anymore. I was the one with the power, and I was taking it back with every word." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I break down? What if I can't get through it?" "Then you break down. There's no shame in that. But you'll get through it anyway because you're stronger than you think, stronger than he ever gave you credit for." They sat together in comfortable silence until Adrian emerged, already dressed in an impeccable suit that made him look like he was preparing for war rather than court. In a way, Lena supposed he was. The courthouse was an imposing classical building in the heart of Milan, all marble columns and stern statues representing justice. Lena's hands shook as they climbed the steps, but she forced herself to keep moving. Francesca met them in the hall outside the courtroom. "Remember what we discussed," the prosecutor said, her voice calm and confident. "Answer only the question asked. Don't elaborate unless I prompt you. If the defense attorney tries to rattle you, take a breath before responding, and look at the jury when you speak, not at Marco." "Okay. You're going to do great. I've seen your practice runs. You're credible, sympathetic, and most importantly, truthful. That's all we need." The courtroom filled quickly. Lena spotted the other victims in the gallery. 3 women whose faces she recognized from the case files, all watching her with expressions that mixed hope and apprehension. They were counting on her to speak for all of them. Then Marco was brought in, and Lena's breath caught. 5 months in jail had changed him. He'd lost weight, his skin had a grayish pallor, and the charming confidence that had been his trademark was gone. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When his eyes found hers across the room, there was no recognition of shared history, no acknowledgement of what they'd meant to each other, however false that meaning had been on his side. There was only cold calculation, the look of a predator assessing a threat. The trial began with opening statements. Francesca laid out the prosecution's case methodically, the pattern of fraud, the false identities, the systematic theft, and the cold-blooded attempt on Lena's life. Marco's attorney, a silver-haired man named Benedetti, countered with a story of misunderstandings and vindictive ex-girlfriends seeking to punish a man who'd simply ended relationships they'd wanted to continue. "You will hear testimony from Ms. Valenti," Benedetti said, gesturing toward Lena. "A woman scorned, who turned a romantic disappointment into a criminal accusation. You will hear about money that was given freely, invested in ventures that unfortunately failed, and a disagreement that has been blown wildly out of proportion." Lena felt rage building in her chest, but Adrian's hand found hers under the table where they sat, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, drawing strength from the contact. The prosecution began building its case with financial experts who traced the money through the elaborate network of accounts. Elena testified about the shell corporations, the false documents, the systematic way the fraud had been structured. Rossi testified about his investigation, about finding the pattern that connected Marco to multiple victims across Italy. Then, on the 3rd day, Francesca called Lena to the stand. The walk from her seat to the witness box felt impossibly long. Lena kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at Marco. She was sworn in, her hand steady on the Bible despite her racing heart, and settled into the chair. Francesca began gently, establishing the basics: name, age, profession, where she'd lived when she met Marco. "Can you tell the court how you met the defendant?" Lena took a breath. "I was having coffee at a cafe near the school where I teach. He came in, ordered at the counter, then asked if he could sit at my table because all the others were full. We started talking." "What did you talk about?" "Books, initially. I was reading a novel, and he said it was one of his favorites. We discussed the themes, the characters. He was charming and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. It felt easy. Did he ask to see you again? Yes. He asked for my number before he left and called that evening to invite me to dinner. Step by step, Francesca walked her through the relationship. The early dates, the gradual deepening of intimacy, the moment Marco had told her he loved her. Lena answered each question carefully, keeping her voice steady even as the memories threatened to overwhelm her. When did the defendant first mention the investment opportunity? About 6 months into our relationship. He said he'd been talking with investors about a luxury hospitality venture in the Alps. He showed me projections, photographs of properties, testimonials from other investors. Did this seem unusual to you? No. Marco worked in consulting, or at least that's what he told me. It seemed natural that he'd have access to these kinds of opportunities. What convinced you to invest? Lena paused, choosing her words carefully. He framed it as our future. He said we were building a life together, that this investment would give us the financial freedom to get married, buy a house, start a family. And he was investing all of his own money as well. I believed we were partners. How much did you invest? 15,000 euros, everything I'd saved over 5 years of teaching. What happened after you transferred the money? This was where it got harder. Lena described the trip to the mountain chalet, the growing sense that something was wrong, the moment Marco revealed the truth. Her voice wavered slightly as she recounted his words. The cruel dismissal, the casual admission that she'd been nothing but a job. What happened then? Francesca asked gently. I got angry. I told him I'd go to the police, that I'd make sure everyone knew what he'd done. He grabbed my arm and dragged me to the back of the chalet. Where did he take you? To a cold storage room. It was a metal room designed to keep food preserved. The temperature inside was just above freezing. What did he do? He pushed me inside and locked the door from the outside. Then he blocked it with something heavy so I couldn't get out, even if the lock failed. Did you try to escape? Yes. I screamed, I pounded on the door until my hands bled. I threw myself against it. Nothing worked. The door was too solid, and whatever he'd used to block it was too heavy. How long were you in that room? I don't know exactly, at least 6 hours, maybe more. Time became confused as hypothermia set in. Can you describe what that was like? Lena closed her eyes briefly, then opened them and looked directly at the jury. First came the shivering. My whole body shook so violently I couldn't control it. Then my extremities went numb. I couldn't feel my fingers or toes. My thinking became foggy, confused. I knew I was dying but couldn't figure out how to stop it. The cold was everywhere, inside and outside. I've never felt anything like it. Did you think you were going to die? Yes, absolutely. No one knew where I was. The caretaker wasn't supposed to come back for 3 days, and the storm was getting worse, which meant even if someone tried to reach the chalet, they might not be able to get through. What did you do? I tried to stay awake, to keep moving, to generate body heat. But eventually, I was too weak and too cold. I accepted that I was going to die there. But you didn't die. Why not? Mr. Moretti found me. He'd been investigating Marco and had people watching the chalet. When Marco left alone, they knew something was wrong. They searched the property and found me just in time. Francesca nodded, then turned to present a series of photographs. The cold storage room, the torn door frame where Adrian had forced entry, medical records showing Lena's core temperature and the frostbite damage to her toes. Looking back now, Miss Valenti, do you believe the defendant intended for you to die in that room? Objection, Benedetti called. Calls for speculation about my client's intent. I'll rephrase, Francesca said smoothly. Ms. Valenti, did the defendant express any concern for your welfare when he locked you in the cold storage room? No, I begged him to let me out, told him I would die. He said I'd probably survive, but if I didn't, that wasn't his problem anymore. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even the judge looked disturbed. No further questions, Francesca said. Lena braced herself as Benedetti stood for cross-examination. He approached the stand with a sympathetic expression that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Valenti, I'm sorry for what you experienced. Breakups are always difficult, especially when financial entanglements are involved. This wasn't a breakup. It was attempted murder and theft. Let's talk about the money you invested. Did my client force you to transfer those funds? No, but simple yes or no, please. Did he physically force you to make the transfer? No. Did he threaten you with violence if you didn't invest? No, he lied about yes or no, Ms. Valenti. No. So you freely chose to give him 15,000 euros based on lies, based on a false relationship and fake investment opportunity. But you did choose to give him the money. No one held a gun to your head. Lena felt her temper rising but forced herself to stay calm. I chose to invest in what I believed was a legitimate business opportunity with my partner. I didn't choose to be defrauded. Let's talk about this alleged attempt on your life. You testified that my client locked you in a cold storage room, but the room wasn't below freezing, was it? It was 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. And you were wearing clothes, not stripped naked and left to die. My clothes were completely inadequate for those temperatures. But you had clothes, you had light. The room had oxygen. My client could have done far worse things if he'd actually wanted you dead. Lena stared at him, stunned by the audacity of the argument. He left me there to die in a blizzard with no one knowing where I was. The only reason I survived is because someone else found me. That's attempted murder. Or it's a cruel, stupid act by a man who was angry and wanted to scare his ex-girlfriend. An act he likely regretted immediately but couldn't reverse because he'd already left the property. He didn't regret anything. He was planning to disappear with my money and everyone else's money. He was caught at the border trying to flee the country. Fleeing an ex-girlfriend who'd threatened to ruin his life, perhaps? Ms. Valenti, isn't it true that you were obsessed with my client? That you'd planned an entire future with him after only 8 months? We were engaged. We lived together. That's not obsession. That's a normal relationship progression. But he didn't see it that way, did he? He tried to end the relationship and you became vindictive. You threatened to destroy him. So he ran, as any person might when faced with false accusations from an angry ex. Lena felt tears of frustration building but refused to let them fall. Nothing about this is false. He's a professional con artist who's been doing this for years. He stole from me and at least 3 other women. He left me to die because I threatened to expose him. Or he made some poor financial decisions and ended a relationship badly, and you've constructed an elaborate narrative to punish him for hurting your feelings. My feelings? Lena's control finally snapped. He locked me in a freezer. I have frostbite scars on my toes. I wake up with nightmares about the cold. This isn't about hurt feelings. This is about a predator who destroys lives for profit. No further questions, Benedetti said smugly, as if her outburst had proven his point about vindictiveness. Lena stepped down from the witness stand feeling shaky and angry. She'd known it would be bad, but experiencing the defense's strategy firsthand, painting her as a desperate, scorned woman fabricating charges, was worse than she'd imagined. Adrian was waiting in the hall when the court broke for lunch. He pulled her into his arms without a word. I lost my temper, Lena said against his chest. I let him get to me. You were magnificent. The jury saw exactly what they needed to see, a woman telling the truth while a lawyer tried to twist it into something ugly. How do you know? Because I was watching them. They weren't buying what Benedetti was selling. They saw the medical evidence, heard your testimony, and saw a defense attorney trying to blame the victim. That never plays well with juries. Francesca found them a few minutes later looking satisfied. You did great, better than great. Benedetti overplayed his hand with that hurt feelings angle. The jury looked disgusted. Over the next week, the prosecution presented the rest of its case. The other victims testified, each telling a similar story of manipulation and theft. Financial experts showed the money trail with damning clarity. Police officers testified about Marco's flight attempt and the evidence found in his car, multiple passports under different names, bundles of cash, documents detailing his next target. Then came the defense's case, which was surprisingly brief. Marco didn't testify. Benedetti probably knew his client would be eviscerated under cross-examination. Instead, they called character witnesses who painted him as a troubled but ultimately good person who'd made mistakes. Nicole, his partner, testified tearfully that she'd had no idea about the fraud, that Marco had told her the women were willing participants in alternative relationship arrangements. She's lying, Elena muttered from beside Lena in the gallery. We have emails proving she helped set up the shell corporations. The prosecution proved exactly that during cross-examination, producing messages where Nicole discussed targets and timeline for extraction. Her credibility collapsed within minutes. Finally, after 2 weeks of testimony, both sides gave closing arguments. Francesca was brilliant, weaving together all the evidence into a damning narrative of systematic predation. Benedetti tried to muddy the waters with reasonable doubt, but his heart didn't seem in it. Even he must have known the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, Lena sat between Adrian and Isabella, holding both their hands as the foreperson stood. On the charge of aggravated fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of identity theft, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find? The pause felt eternal. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Lena heard sobbing from one of the other victims, heard Marco's sharp intake of breath, heard the judge calling for order. But mostly, she felt a weight she hadn't known she was carrying suddenly lift from her chest. Guilty. On all counts. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, and Marco was led away in handcuffs, his face blank with shock. He'd actually believed he'd get away with it, Lena realized. Right up until the verdict, he'd thought his charm and his lawyer's tricks would save him. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded them, shouting questions. Adrian's security team, when had they arrived, formed a protective barrier as they made their way to the car. How do you feel about the verdict, Ms. Valenti? Are you satisfied with the outcome? What do you want to say to other victims of romance fraud? Lena stopped, surprising everyone, including Adrian. She turned to face the cameras, feeling Isabella's supportive presence beside her. I want to say that if you've been victimized by someone you trusted, it's not your fault. These predators are professionals who study human psychology and exploit our best instincts, our capacity for love, trust, and hope. But I also want to say that you can survive this. You can rebuild, and you can fight back. Justice is possible, even when it seems impossible. What's next for you? Another reporter called. Lena looked at Adrian, who was watching her with something like awe on his face. I'm going to keep fighting, she said simply, for other victims, to stop other predators. This case is over, but the work isn't. In the car, Isabella hugged her fiercely. That was perfect. You're perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm just angry enough to do something about it. Best motivation there is, Adrian said, taking her hand. 2 weeks later, they returned for sentencing. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked at Marco with undisguised contempt. Mr. Bellini, you have systematically destroyed lives for personal profit. You preyed on women who trusted you, stole their savings, and when one threatened to expose you, you attempted to murder her. The evidence shows no remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing, only calculation about how to avoid consequences. This court sentences you to 18 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling 197,000 euros. 18 years. Marco would be in his 50s when he was released. His daughter would be grown. The life he'd built with Nicole would be gone. As he was led away, he looked at Lena one final time. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing fear or hurt. After a moment, he dropped his eyes and was gone. Nicole received 5 years for her role in the fraud scheme, though she'd continue protesting her innocence. The other victims would receive their money back, along with interest and compensation for emotional damages. But more than the sentences or the money, what mattered was what happened next. The case became national news. Reporters called it a landmark prosecution of romance fraud. Victims' advocacy groups held it up as an example of how these crimes should be handled. And Lena found herself thrust into a role she'd never anticipated, spokesperson for survivors of financial and emotional abuse. You don't have to do this, Adrian told her after she'd received the 5th interview request in a week. You've done enough. You can walk away and live your life. What if I don't want to walk away? What if I want to use what happened to me to help other people? Then I'll support you. But I need to know it's what you want, not what you think you should do. Lena considered this carefully. The truth was, she'd found purpose in the work she'd been doing with Adrian's team. She was good at it, and more than that, it gave meaning to what Marco had done to her. It transformed her from a victim into someone who fought back, who protected others. I want to expand what we're doing, she said slowly. Create a foundation specifically for romance fraud victims. Help them report crimes, connect them with resources, provide financial support while they recover. Use my story to show them that survival and justice are possible." Adrian smiled. "I think that's a brilliant idea, and I know someone who might want to be involved." Isabella joined them that evening, and over wine and pasta, they planned what would become the Valenti Foundation for fraud victims. Isabella would handle victim services, using her nursing background and personal experience. Lena would manage outreach and advocacy. Adrian would provide funding and his investigative network. "We're going to save lives," Isabella said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings built on old wounds. To transformation," Lena added. "To family," Adrian finished, looking at both women with something soft in his usually guarded expression. They clinked glasses. Three people who'd been broken by betrayal and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. The foundation launched 3 months later, and within weeks they were flooded with requests for help. Women and men who'd been scammed, who'd lost everything to someone they trusted, who didn't know where to turn. The team worked around the clock, coordinating with law enforcement, tracking down stolen funds, providing legal assistance and emotional support. Lena discovered she had a gift for public speaking, for taking her pain and transforming it into something that inspired others. She gave talks at universities, women's shelters, community centers. She appeared on news programs and podcasts, always returning to the same message. You are not stupid for trusting, you are not weak for loving, and you can survive this. 6 months after Marco's sentencing, Elena tracked down his final hidden account, nearly 50,000 euros he'd been planning to use for his escape. The money was seized and distributed among his victims, with Lena's share going directly into the foundation. "It feels right," she told Adrian that night. Using his stolen money to help other people he might have victimized. Taking something evil and making it good. They were on the terrace again, the same place where they'd almost kissed months ago. The city glittered below them, full of light and life and possibility. "You've changed," Adrian observed, "from the woman I pulled out of that freezer. You're harder now, but also freer." "I had to die to be reborn," Lena said. "That sounds dramatic, but it's true. The person I was before Marco, naive, passive, waiting for life to happen to her, she died in that cold storage room. Who I am now is someone I built from the ground up. And who is that? Someone who fights, someone who protects, someone who knows that love and trust are risks worth taking, but who takes them with eyes wide open." She turned to face him. "Someone who loves you, by the way. I don't think I've actually said that yet." Adrian's careful control slipped, revealing the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "You love me. Completely. Imperfectly. With full awareness that you're controlling and possessive and sometimes make decisions for me that I should make myself. But yes, I love you. I love you too." The words came out rough, as if he wasn't used to saying them. "I have for months, probably since you told me off for being overprotective the 3rd time we worked together, but I was afraid to say it, afraid it would pressure you or make you feel obligated because I saved your life." "You didn't save my life. You gave me the chance to save my own life. There's a difference." Lena moved into his arms, feeling the rightness of it, the way they fit together despite, or maybe because of their jagged edges. "And I don't feel obligated. I feel grateful for the chance to love someone who sees me as I actually am, not as some idealized version he's constructed." They kissed as the city lights sparkled around them, 2 damaged people who'd found each other in the aftermath of betrayal and built something real from the ruins. The Foundation's 1st anniversary arrived during an unseasonably warm October, and Lena stood in the newly renovated office space overlooking the Navigli district, watching workers hang the final pieces of artwork, photographs of survivors who'd agreed to share their stories. Each face represented a victory, a life reclaimed from the wreckage of betrayal. "We've helped 83 people in 12 months, Isabella said, joining her at the window. "Recovered over €500,000 in stolen funds. Assisted in 14 arrests. Those are real numbers, Lena. Real lives changed. And yet there are thousands more we haven't reached. Millions probably across Europe alone. You can't save everyone. I know. But I can save some. And some is better than none." The anniversary gala that evening drew an impressive crowd. Victims they'd helped, donors, journalists, law enforcement officials who'd partnered with the foundation. Lena wore a midnight blue dress that Adrian had insisted on buying her, though she'd argued about the expense until he'd pointed out that she never spent money on herself and maybe, just maybe, she deserved something beautiful. She was greeting guests when she noticed a woman hovering near the entrance, clearly debating whether to come in. Something about her posture, the hunched shoulders, the downcast eyes, the way she held her purse like a shield, was painfully familiar. Lena excused herself and approached gently. "Hi, I'm Lena Valenti. Are you here for the gala?" The woman looked up, and Lena saw the telltale signs of recent trauma. Red-rimmed eyes, no makeup to cover the exhaustion, clothes that hung loose as if she'd lost weight rapidly. "I'm sorry," the woman said. "I probably shouldn't be here. I saw the announcement and I thought maybe, but this is a celebration and I'm not." She trailed off, tears welling up. "Come with me." Lena took her arm gently and guided her past the main event space to a quiet office. "What's your name?" "Sophia. Sophia Marchetti." "Sophia, tell me what happened." The story that poured out was devastatingly familiar. A man named Alessandro, a whirlwind romance, promises of a future together, an investment opportunity that required Sophia's life savings. Then the disappearance, the discovery of the lies, the crushing realization that she'd been played. "He took 40,000 euros, Sophia whispered. "My parents gave me that money when they sold their house. They're retired, they downsized so I could have a nest egg for my future. And I gave it all to a man I'd known for 3 months. What kind of idiot does that? The kind who trusted someone she loved. That doesn't make you an idiot, it makes you human." Lena pulled out her phone. "When did this happen?" 2 weeks ago. I filed a police report, but they said without more evidence of fraud, it's just a civil matter, a bad investment. The police don't have our resources. Give me Alessandro's full name and every detail you can remember. We'll find him." Sophia's eyes widened. "Really? You think you can?" "I know we can. This is what we do." By the time they returned to the gala, Lena had Sophia's information and had already texted Dante to start preliminary research. Adrian found her an hour later, deep in conversation with Sophia and 2 other recent victims who'd approached during the evening. "You're supposed to be celebrating," he said gently, "not working. This is celebrating. Look at them." Lena gestured to the 3 women who were comparing stories with the fierce camaraderie of survivors. A month ago, they each thought they were alone. Now they know they're part of something bigger. That's worth more than champagne and speeches. "You're remarkable. You know that? You've mentioned it once or twice." He pulled her aside, away from the crowd. "I have something for you, an anniversary gift." "Adrian, we agreed no gifts. The foundation is gift enough." "This isn't from me. It's from all of Marco's victims. Well, technically it's from Marco, but only because the court ordered it." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for 15,000 euros, her original investment, returned in full with interest. "The restitution finally cleared," Adrian explained. "Every victim is getting their money back this week. Elena wanted to present it at the gala, make a big moment of it, but I thought you'd prefer privacy." Lena stared at the check, feeling unexpectedly emotional. It wasn't about the money. She'd stopped caring about the money months ago. It was what it represented. Full circle. Complete justice. The final official acknowledgement that she'd been wronged and was now being made whole. "I want to donate it to the foundation," she said. "All of it." "Lena, I mean it. I don't need it. I have a salary now. I have savings again. This money was tainted from the moment I transferred it to Marco. But if we use it to help other people, then something good comes from something terrible." Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Lena realized that this, being held by someone who knew her completely and loved her anyway, was worth more than any amount of money Marco had stolen. The gala wound down near midnight, and the team gathered in the office for a private toast. Rossi, Elena, Dante, Isabella, Adrian, and Lena, the 6 people who'd built something meaningful from the ashes of trauma. "To the first year," Rossi said, raising his glass, "and to many more." "To catching bastards and saving lives," Elena added. "To family," Isabella said, smiling at Lena and Adrian, "the one we choose." As they drank, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then sat up straighter. "You're going to want to see this." He pulled up a news article on his laptop. The headline read, "International Romance Fraud Ring Exposed. dozens arrested across Europe. What is this? Lena asked, leaning over his shoulder. Remember how we shared our investigative methods with Interpol 6 months ago? They've been using our model to track other fraud networks. This is the result: a coordinated strike across 7 countries. They arrested 43 people, froze over 2 million euros in stolen assets. The article featured quotes from victims, from police officials, and from Francesca, who credited the Valenti Foundation's work with breaking the case open. We did this, Elena breathed. Our work led to this. Not just our work, Lena corrected. Every victim who came forward, who testified, who refused to let shame silence them. They did this. But she felt pride swelling in her chest nonetheless. 43 predators off the streets, 2 million euros recovered, countless future victims saved. The next morning, Lena woke to her phone exploding with messages. The article had gone viral, and interview requests were pouring in from international media. The Foundation's website had crashed from traffic, and there were over 300 emails from people asking for help, sharing their stories, offering support. This is overwhelming, Lena told Adrian over breakfast. How do we handle this kind of attention? We hire more staff, expand the operation, turn this from a local foundation into an international organization. He paused. Unless that's not what you want. We can keep it small, manageable. No. I want to expand. I want to help everyone we can reach. Lena looked at the emails, at the desperate pleas for help, at the stories of loss and betrayal. But I'm going to need your help. I'm good at the public-facing stuff, at talking to victims, but the logistics of scaling up, that's what I do best. Leave it to me. Over the next 6 months, the foundation transformed. They hired a staff of 20, opened satellite offices in Paris and Barcelona, partnered with law enforcement agencies across Europe. The original team, Rossi, Elena, Dante, trained new investigators in their methods. Isabella developed a comprehensive support program that included therapy, legal assistance, and financial counseling. And Lena became the public face of the movement against romance fraud. She gave a TED Talk that was viewed millions of times. She testified before parliamentary committees about the need for stronger fraud prosecution laws. She appeared on television programs and wrote op-eds, and slowly, steadily changed the narrative around fraud victims from shame to sympathy to solidarity. You're making a real difference, her mother told her during one of their weekly calls. Lena had finally told her family the full story of what happened with Marco, and while the conversation had been painful, it had also been healing. I'm so proud of who you've become. I'm proud of who I've become too, Lena admitted. I never thought I'd say that. I spent so long feeling ashamed, feeling stupid, but now I feel strong. Not every day was easy. There were still nightmares about the cold, still moments when trust felt impossible, still times when the sheer volume of suffering they encountered threatened to overwhelm her. But she had support now, therapy, medication when needed, a team who understood, and Adrian who held her through the bad nights and celebrated the good days. It was during one of those bad nights, nearly 2 years after Marco's arrest, that everything shifted again. Lena woke gasping from a nightmare, the familiar sensation of cold overwhelming her senses. Adrian was immediately there, holding her, grounding her. You're safe, he murmured. You're warm. You're in Milan, in our bed. The cold can't touch you anymore. Our bed. They'd finally given up the pretense of separate bedrooms 6 months ago, acknowledging what everyone else had known, that they'd become a permanent fixture in each other's lives. As her breathing settled, Lena made a decision she'd been considering for weeks. I want to visit him. Adrian went very still. Visit who? Marco. In prison. I want to see him one more time. Why would you put yourself through that? Because I need to look him in the eye as the person I am now, not the person I was then. I need him to see that he didn't break me, that I took what he did and turned it into something that's destroying everything he built. And you think that will help? I think it will give me closure. Real closure, not just legal closure. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I'll arrange it, but I'm coming with you. I need to do this alone. Then I'll wait outside. But I'm not letting you go to a prison 2 hours away without backup. Non-negotiable. Lena smiled despite the heaviness of the topic. Still controlling. Always. You knew what you were getting into. The prison was a grim concrete structure outside Turin, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Lena signed in, went through security, and was led to a visitation room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Marco was already waiting, seated at a table behind a plexiglass barrier. Prison had aged him dramatically. He was thinner, grayer, his posture defeated. When he saw Lena, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or fear. She sat down and picked up the phone on her side of the barrier. After a moment, he did the same. Lena. His voice was hoarse, as if he didn't use it much. I didn't expect you to ever want to see me again. I didn't expect it either, but here we are. Why are you here? To tell you that you failed. You tried to destroy me, tried to leave me for dead, but I survived. More than survived. I've built something you can never take away. A foundation that's helped hundreds of people recover from what people like you did to them. We've assisted in over 60 arrests, recovered millions in stolen funds. Your legacy isn't the money you stole. It's the movement you inspired to stop people like you. Marco's face remained impassive, but she saw his hands tighten on the phone. I saw the news stories, he said finally. You've become quite famous. The brave survivor turning tragedy into triumph. Very inspiring. This isn't about fame, it's about justice and protection. Every person we help is someone you'll never be able to hurt. I'm in prison for 18 years. I couldn't hurt anyone, even if I wanted to. No, but others like you are still out there. Were still out there before we caught them. You created a blueprint for psychological torture, and now we've created a blueprint for stopping it. Is that what you came here to tell me, that you won? No, I came to tell you that I forgive you. For the first time, genuine emotion crossed his face. Shock, disbelief. You what? I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I spent too long letting what you did define me, poison me, control my life. But forgiveness means I get to let go of the anger and the pain. It means you don't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. I don't believe you. I don't need you to believe me. This isn't for you. It's for me. I forgive you for the lies, for the theft, for locking me in that room and leaving me to die. I forgive you so I can be fully free of you. Marco stared at her, and for just a moment, she saw something that might have been regret flash across his features, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual mask. Nicole left me, he said abruptly. Took our daughter and moved to Spain. New name, new life. I'll probably never see them again. I'm sorry for your daughter. She deserves better than having a father in prison and a mother who was complicit in fraud. You're not going to gloat? Tell me I deserve to lose everything? You do deserve it. But gloating requires me to care about your suffering, and I don't. You're just a sad man who destroyed lives for money and is now facing consequences. That's not my problem anymore. She stood, preparing to leave. Lena. His voice stopped her. For what it's worth, you weren't just a mark. At the beginning, before I really got to know you, I thought you might be. But you were different, kinder, more genuine. If I'd been capable of actually loving someone, it might have been you. If you'd been capable of loving someone, you wouldn't be in prison. Lena hung up the phone without waiting for his response and walked out without looking back. Adrian was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car. He straightened when he saw her, studying her face. How do you feel? Free? Lena said simply. Finally, completely free. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself be held, let herself feel the safety and warmth that had replaced the cold and fear. Take me home, she said. Our home or the foundation office? Our home. I need a day off from saving the world. They drove back to Milan in comfortable silence, Lena's hand in Adrian's as the countryside rolled past. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, lonely, desperate for love, willing to overlook red flags because she wanted so badly to believe in fairy tales. That woman had died in a freezer in the mountains. The woman who'd emerged was harder, but also more authentic. She knew her worth now, knew that love should feel like freedom, not imprisonment, knew that strength came not from never being hurt, but from how you responded to the hurt. That evening, they had dinner with Isabella at a small trattoria in Brera. The three of them had developed traditions over the past 2 years. Sunday dinners, monthly movie nights, annual trips to the coast. They'd become the family none of them had chosen, but all of them needed. I have news, Isabella announced over wine. I'm seeing someone. A teacher I met at a conference. His name is Marco, which I know is terrible timing, but we're calling him by his last name, Ricci, so it's fine. Isabella, that's wonderful. Lena reached across to squeeze her hand. Tell us everything. As Isabella shared details about her new relationship, how they'd met, how careful she was being, how therapy was helping her navigate trust issues, Lena felt a surge of protective affection. Isabella had been so damaged by her trauma, had spent years afraid to even consider dating. This was huge progress. Are you happy? Adrian asked his sister, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. I'm terrified, Isabella admitted. But yes, also happy. Ricci knows everything that happened, and he's patient with my triggers and boundaries. He might actually be a good one. If he hurts you, I'll destroy him, Adrian said casually. Obviously, that's what big brothers are for. They laughed, and Lena thought about how far they'd all come. Adrian, learning to let people in despite his control issues. Isabella, brave enough to try love again. And herself, transformed from victim to advocate to someone who knew that surviving wasn't enough. You had to build something meaningful from the survival. A week later, as Lena was reviewing case files in the foundation office, Elena knocked on her door with an unusual expression. You have a visitor, someone who says they need to speak with you specifically. Who? She wouldn't give her name, but Lena, I think it's Marco's ex-partner, Nicole. Lena's first instinct was to refuse. She had no interest in talking to the woman who'd helped Marco scam dozens of people. But curiosity won out. Nicole looked nothing like the confident woman from the photographs. She was pale, thin, dressed in cheap clothing that suggested her comfortable life had evaporated. She refused to meet Lena's eyes as she sat down. Thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I am, Lena said honestly. What do you want? To apologize and to help. Apologize for what specifically? Helping Marco steal from people? Setting up the shell corporations? Lying in court? All of it, Nicole's voice broke. I told myself I was just helping with the business side, that the women knew what they were getting into, that it wasn't really hurting anyone, but I knew. Deep down, I always knew what he was doing was wrong. Why are you here now? Because I served my time, 5 years, reduced to 3 for good behavior. I got out 2 months ago, and I've been trying to rebuild my life. My daughter barely knows me. I have no money, no job prospects, no future. And I realized that the only way forward is to make amends for what I did. Amends how? Nicole pulled out a USB drive and set it on the desk. Everything I know about Marco's operation, names of people he worked with, other victims he targeted before I met him, accounts he set up that the police never found, and information about other fraud rings operating in Italy. I know where they operate, how they recruit, how they move money. I want to help you stop them. Lena stared at the USB drive, then at Nicole. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. I'm a convicted criminal who enabled a monster because I loved him and wanted the comfortable life he provided. But I'm also a mother who wants her daughter to be able to respect her someday. And the only way that happens is if I spend the rest of my life trying to undo the damage I helped cause. This could be a trap. Evidence could be fabricated or designed to implicate innocent people. It could be. But it's not. Check it. Verify everything. I'll submit to any lie detector test you want. I'll testify in any case you bring. I need to do something right. Lena made a decision that probably would have seemed insane 2 years ago, but now felt instinctive. Okay, I'll look at what you have. But this doesn't earn you forgiveness or absolution. This is just you doing the bare minimum to not be a complete monster. Understood? Understood. The information Nicole provided was extraordinary. It led to the arrest of 8 more con artists and the recovery of over 300,000 euros in stolen funds. Nicole proved to be exactly what she'd promised, a cooperative witness who provided detailed testimony and submitted to extensive verification. She's trying to become a better person, Lena told Adrian one night as they reviewed the latest case Nicole had helped break. Isn't that what we want? For people to change? People like Nicole, maybe. People who are complicit but not the primary perpetrators. But people like Marco? I don't think they change. I think they just get better at hiding what they are. Maybe you're right, or maybe change is possible for everyone, but only if they genuinely want it and do the work. Lena closed her laptop. Either way, Nicole's information is saving lives. That's what matters. 3 years after that night in the freezer, the Foundation celebrated another milestone. 1,000 victims helped, 10 million euros recovered, over 200 perpetrators arrested. The organization had expanded to 12 countries and employed nearly 80 people. Lena stood on stage at the celebration event, looking out at the crowd of survivors, donors, staff, and supporters. She saw Sophia, the woman from the first gala, now working as a counselor for the foundation. She saw the other women Marco had victimized, all of them rebuilt and thriving. She saw law enforcement officials who'd partnered with them, journalists who'd told their stories, politicians who'd changed laws based on their advocacy. And in the front row, she saw Adrian and Isabella, the family that had formed from tragedy and grown into something unbreakable. "When I was locked in that freezer," Lena said, her voice carrying across the silent room, "I thought my story was ending. I thought I'd lost everything. My money, my trust, my future. I was wrong. That freezer was where my real story began. Everything I've built, everyone we've helped, every predator we've stopped, none of it would exist if I hadn't survived that night. So while I would never thank the man who tried to kill me, I can acknowledge that he inadvertently created something he never intended. A movement, a community, a force for justice that grows stronger every day." The applause was thunderous, but Lena barely heard it. She was thinking about the long journey from that frozen room to this moment, about every person she'd met along the way, about the life she'd built from absolute zero. After the event, Adrian found her on the Foundation's terrace. She'd insisted on having one, a callback to where they'd first almost kissed. "Big day," he said, handing her champagne. "Huge day. Sometimes I can't believe this is real, that we've accomplished this much." "You've accomplished this much. I just provided resources. You provided everything. Funding, yes, but also belief. You believed I could do this before I believed it myself." Adrian set down his glass and pulled a small box from his pocket. Lena's heart stuttered. "I've been carrying this around for 6 months," he said, "waiting for the right moment. But I've realized there is no perfect moment, no ideal time. There's just us and the life we've built and the future we could have." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Lena Valenti, you're the strongest, most infuriating, most remarkable person I've ever met. You've challenged every wall I've built, forced me to be better, shown me that control isn't the same as safety. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. Will you marry me?" Lena looked at the ring, then at Adrian's face, seeing the vulnerability beneath his usual composure. She thought about Daniel's proposal, which had been all performance and manipulation. This was nothing like that. This was real, built on years of partnership and honesty and choosing each other every day despite their damage. "Yes," she said, and watched his face transform with relief and joy. "But on 2 conditions." "Name them." "1, we have a long engagement. No rushing into this. We take our time and do it right." "Agreed." "And 2, you stop trying to control everything. We're partners, equals. That means trusting me to make my own decisions, even when you think you know better." "That's going to be hard for me." "I know, but you're going to do it anyway, because that's what love requires." Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her close. "Deal, though I reserve the right to occasionally forget and have you remind me." "I can live with that." They kissed as the city lights sparkled around them, 2 broken people who'd found each other in the aftermath of betrayal and built something neither could have imagined alone. The wedding took place 2 years later in a small ceremony overlooking Lake Como. Not the isolated chalet where Lena had nearly died, but a beautiful villa where the mountains were a backdrop, not a prison. Isabella served as maid of honor. Rossi walked Lena down the aisle, having become a father figure over the years. The guest list was small, just family, close friends, and some of the foundation staff who'd become family. As Lena stood beside Adrian, promising to love and honor and challenge him for the rest of their lives, she thought about how far she'd traveled from that freezing room. The road had been brutal and beautiful in equal measure, but she wouldn't change any of it. Because that suffering had led to this, to purpose, to family, to a love that was real and complicated and worth fighting for. After the ceremony, as they danced under the stars, Adrian whispered, "No regrets? About marrying you? None. About everything that came before? Also none, because it all led here. Even the freezer? Especially the freezer. That's where I learned that I could survive anything. That's where my real strength was born." The foundation continued to grow, helping thousands more people over the years. Lena became an internationally recognized advocate, while Adrian expanded his network of justice-focused initiatives. Isabella married Ricci and had 2 children who called Lena and Adrian aunt and uncle. The team stayed together, adding new members but maintaining the core mission. And sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, Lena would go to the terrace and look out at the city lights and remember the cold. Not with fear or trauma, but with a kind of fierce gratitude, because that cold had forged her into steel, had transformed her from someone things happened to into someone who made things happen. She'd lost everything in that freezer: her money, her naivety, her blind trust in fairy tales. But she'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that she could rebuild from nothing, that she was stronger than any predator who tried to break her, that love was worth the risk when it was built on truth instead of lies. The woman who'd lain freezing on a concrete floor, terrified and alone, had become someone who warmed others with her strength. The victim had become a victor, not through revenge, but through transformation. And when Adrian found her on the terrace, as he always did, pulling her close and anchoring her in the present, Lena knew with absolute certainty that she'd found what she'd been searching for all along. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the kind of love that only comes from choosing each other, flaws and all, every single day. The cold couldn't touch her anymore. She'd survived it, conquered it, and used it to build a life of warmth and meaning. And that, she thought as she leaned into Adrian's embrace, was the best revenge and the sweetest victory of all. Sometimes losing everything reveals who truly stands beside you when the world turns cold. And sometimes the person who answers your desperate message becomes the one who never leaves. Not because they saved you, but because you saved each other, and together built something neither could have created alone. The freezer was where Lena's old life ended, but it was also where her real life began, and she wouldn't trade that beginning for anything in the world.